Without further ado, I think it's time we introduce you to our expert. Dr. Oneith Cadiz, welcome so much tonight. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Yes, we have. We're really in for a treat. She has got so much wisdom to share with us. She is an ABP board certified general pediatrician, and she's also assistant professor at the University of Miami. So, one of my favorite things about these times that we get together and the experts that we bring you is not only are they medical professionals, but so many of them are educators. So they are staying top of the latest trends and things going on. And so I just love that. And I know you bring so much expertise in that. She graduated from the University of South Florida College of Medicine, where she also completed her pediatric residency. And during that time, she served as chief pediatric resident. That sounds awesome. Congratulations.
Thank
Her approach to pediatrics models her approach to life, comprehensive, inclusive of injury prevention, and generous with compassion. She's award-winning educator and well-recognized mentor in undergraduate and graduate medical education for over a decade. So her mentorship of students and residents includes advocacy work in injury, including firearm injury prevention, which is what we'll be discussing tonight. And she continues to advocate for her patients, both in the clinic and in the community, where she serves on the Fetal and Infant Mortality Review Community Action Group and the Case Review Team. So she is really taking all this expertise and not just keeping it for herself, but teaching others so they can teach others, so they can help others. So, Dr. Cadiz, thank you so much for spending your time with us tonight.
you, Sarah.
Yeah. I want to just jump right in. Again, those of you that are listening, if at any point you have a question for our expert, just drop it in the Q&A feature and I will get that in front of our expert. But let's start with, why are guns? Kind of seems like an obvious question, but tell us, why are guns in the home a risk for children?
It does seem like an obvious question. I agree with you, but unfortunately, many people aren't aware of the statistics. For example, as of 2020, guns passed motor vehicle accidents as the leading cause of death for children and teens in the United States aged 1 to 19. In homes with guns, the likelihood of unintentional deaths, suicide, and homicide by a shooting is 4 times higher. For this reasoning, counseling on seatbelts and pool safety, counseling parents on firearm ownership and safe storage practices is just as important because it helps decrease the risk of injury and death to children.
Yeah, I was thinking, before we started this, it's not something that I naturally think about. We don't have guns in our home, but also I don't think about my children going to another home and thinking about gun safety there. But in our day and age, it's so sad. It's something that we've got to keep top of mind and be prepared to have a plan for. So, what is the safest way to store a gun?
So children naturally are safest in a home with no guns in it. However, if you do own a gun or if you have guns in your home, make sure you are storing it safely. That includes keeping the gun unloaded, keeping the gun locked, storing ammunition separately from the gun, and keeping the ammunition locked. And of course, making sure that children and teens can't access the keys or the combination to lock boxes and safes.
Yeah, that's good. So why is proper gun, again, I feel like we know these answers, but I love hearing, because you're sharing these statistics and things with us that help amplify the question. But why is proper gun storage so important?
So it's so important because, as I indicated, guns kill more children than crashes, swimming pools, cancers, or any other infection.
Wow.
Parents don't realize it, but children as young as 3 years old may be strong enough to pull the trigger of a handgun. And suicide attempts involving firearms are 91% fatal compared to 23% of drug overdoses. Research
Wow.
clearly shows that secure gun storage plays a vital role in reducing the risk of gun violence. Storing firearms securely not only protects children, but also protects adults by preventing unintentional shootings, gun suicides, and gun theft.
Mm. Yeah, we would hate for any of this to ever happen on our watch simply because we didn't store it correctly. It would just be awful. Okay, what about, I've got two boys. They're little, but they're getting bigger and like they want a BB gun and maybe they want a paintball gun one day. So, what are some examples of that and how should parents take precaution with BB guns or paintball guns?
So, when possible, it's best not to let your children play with toy guns. Some parents consider non powder guns, like you mentioned, the BB guns, the pellet guns, and paintball guns, to be toys. But in actuality, these guns can fire at the speed of traditional guns, which lead to nearly 22,000 injuries, especially eye injuries per year.
Well,
Parents believe that children know the difference between real guns and toy guns, but research shows that in 16% of unintentional firearm deaths among children younger than 13 years of age, the gun was mistaken for a toy.
wow. Wow. Yeah. I'm like, I don't even want the toy ones anywhere near, I'm like, tell my kids, I'm like, don't play guns, play something else. But yeah, it's to the statistic hearing that many can be, that's wild. How do we ask our guy, again, I said, if maybe you don't have them in your house or you do, but they're locked away, but what about guns in the homes of family and friends? You send your kids to spend the night or you send your kids to, go with family for a few days.
Excellent question, Sierra, because even if you don't own a gun in your home, nearly half of Americans report living in a home with at least one gun. In
Mm,
fact, about one-third of American children live in a home with firearms. And of these, 43% contain at least one unlocked firearm.
mm,
13% contain one unlocked firearm that's loaded or stored with ammunition.
wow,
And
wow.
finally, more than a third of unintentional shootings of children occur in the home of friends, neighbors,
Mm,
and relatives. So it's important to ask about guns in the homes where your children do visit because asking saves kids. A question as simple as, is there an unlocked gun in your home, can save your child's life.
yeah,
Oftentimes it feels awkward. I
yeah,
understand. It
yeah,
is, but most people will understand that you're trying to protect your child.
yeah,
So
for
some
sure.
other ways to kind of approach the topic,
Mhm.
just some ideas is, you could start out by saying, my child is curious, so I'm always worried about his safety.
Yeah,
Is there a gun or anything else dangerous in your house that they can get into?
yeah,
Another one is, we saw a campaign online and I've started asking everyone, how do you store the guns in your home?
yeah.
And
That's
finally, I always tell my patients, I don't mind being the enemy. Our
yeah,
doctor recommended that I check to make sure that there are no guns where my children play. Do you have any unlocked guns in your home?
good.
So these are different ways of approaching the question.
Mhm. And I would say asking the question is worth the awkward feelings to know and that things are safe and that your children are gonna be safe. Yeah, it's
It
totally
is.
worth
We
it.
ask about peanuts and and
Yeah,
and pets and pools, but we oftentimes forget to ask about guns and
yeah.
firearms.
That's so good too. I love the angle because I have very curious children, but which is true. Like a curious child is not going to have any problem opening a drawer or peeking around or grabbing and seeing. And so that's a great angle for approaching that subject and with someone. Okay, but what about should we have the conversation with our child? What should we tell our children about guns?
Because of the prevalence that I just mentioned, it is important to talk to your children about guns. So we want to tell them that guns are very dangerous and they should
Mhm.
follow these simple rules if they see one.
Yeah.
One, stop what you're doing.
Hmm.
Two, don't touch the gun or allow anyone else in the room to touch it, even
Yeah.
if it looks like a toy.
Yeah.
Three, leave the room where the gun is. And finally, tell an adult right away.
Yeah. That's
With
good.
older children, you can even discuss real life consequences about legal obligations and the importance of
Mhm.
responsible behavior.
Yeah. No, that's good. I always think topics like this, I'm like, I don't want my kids to be unaware and then later find out. And I'm like, I want to be the expert. Like I want to come and be like, you can talk to mommy about all these things and to breach those subjects with them. So thank you for sharing that. What are some common myths that you feel like people have with guns and firearms?
This is a great one. So, the biggest myth is the idea that if I just talk to my child and tell them not to touch the gun, that it's enough to keep them safe.
Mm,
Like we just said, children and teens are naturally curious, they're impulsive, their young minds are still developing, and they can't truly understand how dangerous guns are.
mm,
So, even when adults give well intentioned warnings, kids often explore a gun if they find it. If they
mhm,
come across a loaded gun, they can accidentally
mm,
hurt or kill themselves or someone
mhm,
else.
mhm.
Therefore, it's the adult's duty to create safety barriers to help protect them. This is why safe gun storage is vital once again. Some
Yeah.
parents believe that hiding their guns will protect children from accessing them, but
Yeah.
75% of children who live in homes with guns know where they're stored.
Wow. Yeah. Would
Mhm.
you say that it's good to communicate with the kids, right? And say, like, "The guns are here, and we don't touch them, and we don't get near them, and we don't" and they're safely locked away so that like you said, so that they know and they're aware of where the storage is, but they know that's a no zone, or what do you think?
I actually would recommend not saying where,
Yeah.
But telling them, if telling them that there is one in the home and that it stays safely secured for their safety and the
Yeah.
safety of everybody else in the home.
That's
When
good.
I ask parents about guns in the home, I'll ask them, do you have a gun in the home? And if
Mhm.
they say yes, I'll ask them, don't tell me where it is, because the child is usually in the room at the same
Yeah.
time. But I
Listening. Yeah.
will ask them, tell me how it's stored.
Yeah, yeah, that's good, that's good. Because if it's stored properly, it doesn't matter where it's stored because it will be safe because it's stored
Exactly.
properly.
Mhm.
That's good, that's good. Alright, here's a great question from one of our audience members. How do we explain to our children, a lot of them are maybe at school and they're seeing a resource officer or they see police officers carrying guns. How do we kind of explain that to them when we say like, "Oh, guns are dangerous, don't get near them." Well, obviously, police officers, maybe resource officers are carrying them.
Uh-huh. Right. So I guess there's a difference between in that particular setting, because those resource officers, those people are there to protect you.
That's
They've
right.
been licensed, they've been trained, they know how to use a weapon, when to appropriately use it. And so that's why there's that difference between them and having a gun just laying around in the home.
That's right. That's right.
Mhm.
Great. All right, let's talk about what are some practices you could take. We talked about how we would broach the subject with a family member about do you have guns or a friend, but what steps can parents take to ensure that other family members are storing them and are adhering to like safe firearm storage practices?
Communication, communication. So
That's right.
educating them about how to safely store their weapons and guns, and when needed, to actually provide access to secure storage options. I
Mhm.
think these are essential for ensuring consistency among family members.
Yeah, that's good. Communicate.
Yeah. So,
Having the conversation. Sometimes
yep.
that feels like the hardest
Communicate
part,
saves
but
communities.
that's
Mhm.
right. That's right. Wow. Okay, let's talk about is there an age appropriate way for parents to talk about gun violence with children? Sadly, it's just in the news every day. I feel like I turn on the news. I don't turn on the news, honestly, in front of my children because I'm like, what are we going to see today? But how can we like approach this conversation developmentally at different ages?
So, as with every topic when we're discussing it with children, whether it's gun violence or even puberty issues, I tell
Mhm.
my parents, be open and honest with your child. If they ask about guns, validate their feelings if they're concerned about their safety. For
Mhm.
different age ranges, it maybe vary just a little bit. So, for early grade children, keeping the information short and simple is probably the best recommendation. Remind them that they have family members, teachers, those police officers that we talked about earlier,
Mhm. Mhm.
doctors and religious leaders and neighbors that are there to protect them. For
Yeah.
very young, you can even use things like picture books or having them draw to help them express their feelings about what they're seeing or what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
With older children, you can discuss how it's wrong or why it's wrong to hurt or kill someone. And
Mhm.
again, emphasize those places that are in place that for the community and what the school is doing to keep them safe. And then
That's
finally, for teens and older children, they may have a strong feelings about gun violence. So you can start by asking them, what do you think about what happened? You can
Mhm.
also use this opportunity to talk about, why people hurt people.
Yeah.
Perhaps they have a mental health illness or trouble with anger, using drugs or alcohol.
Yeah.
Let teens know that there are people in the community and programs to help in these cases. Remind
Okay.
them that if they feel angry, that they should talk to you or to a trusted adult. And this is
Mhm.
also a good time to even mention the dangers of drugs and alcohol with your
Yeah.
teens.
Yeah, that's good. So many important conversations that we get to have as parents, and it
Yep.
can feel overwhelming of, like, how to navigate and when to have these conversations, and there's so many big topics to cover and talk about, and sadly, it just feels like, our kids, we just are early and earlier that we've gotta have these talks with them, but I think exactly what you said is just having that communication seems so key to keep that open and to stay approachable with our kids about it. Anything else you would add just that might help, help deter them from unnecessary fear, especially with, things that we're seeing at schools and in public places, sadly.
So once again, I guess talking about the safety protocols, have a plan to
Yeah,
remind them, do not touch and leave the room if they do,
yeah,
if there is a gun present in the room. emphasizing reporting concerns. Call a
Yeah,
parent, telling an adult that it's not tattling. It ensures not only their safety, but also the safety of their friends and their family.
that's right.
Parents can oftentimes reassure about the efforts in place to keep them safe. Security checks of all guests at schools, doors to the outside being locked, and practicing emergency drills. So on New Year's Day, I actually practice fire safety and CPR and all of these emergency type drills with my
Yeah.
family every
That's
year.
great. That's good to have it like a New Year's Day, New
Yeah,
Year, practice all the
we're
things.
here.
I
What
love
else are
that.
we going to do?
I love that. We were recently talking about that, like a fire, like what's our fire plan? We were talking about with our kids. But this is so great. We're gonna add this in. I'm gonna add if you see a gun, you stop, you walk away, you tell an adult you don't touch it. I think that's so good. It's kind of like a stop, drop, and roll thing I want to teach
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
Because like you
absolutely.
said, they can save their life or someone else's. This is a question from our audience, but also something I wanted to get to. We're talking about we see a police officer with a gun. Okay, they're here to protect us. Some families are big hunters, and so maybe they've grown up around guns, and maybe young children or teens or whatever have learned safe practices in that arena. But what about in a fictional way? There's so many video games and things now that are so violent, and they're just being exposed to that where it almost feels again I'm a mom of little people, so I'm outside looking in, but it feels like it could be so desensitizing. I don't know, talk to us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So, Sierra, you actually mentioned it earlier about, trying to discourage your kids to play with guns. And parents should try and lead by example by one, demonstrated safe handling if you are involved in hunting or shooting or those kinds of things and safe storage practices. You can also, set boundaries on media consumption, engage in open conversations, and
Mhm.
direct the children to interest towards more safer educational activities.
Yeah.
But it comes down to talking to them. Make
Yeah.
sure that they understand that gun violence that they see on TV and the movies and in the video games that they play, that that's not real. They
Yeah.
need to be told and probably reminded again and again
Again.
and again,
Again, again.
and that in real life, children are killed and hurt badly by guns. Although popular media often romanticizes gun use, children need to learn that weapons can be extremely dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Man, I just think about when I was, I don't know, in high school and college playing video games with friends. Like we were playing Mario Kart, like it was safe.
Exactly.
Safe. The wildest thing you could do was, I don't know, flip the car over. But yeah, so I do think the video game thing is like you said, we just have to keep having those conversations and lead by example. So that's great.
It's
How can
important to
parents
know what your children are doing.
That's right. That's
Mhm.
right. That's right. And who they're hanging out with, because I think, again, I have little people, so we're not there yet, but I think you don't know that a friend doesn't have dad's gun in his car, or he's driving dad's car for the weekend and dad has a car. I guess speak about that. I mean, people that have guns in their cars, like, is that a thing? That's a thing, right?
It is, it is. And there are lock boxes and safes for safe gun storage in cars as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's great. Okay, talk to us a little bit about how parents can balance like home defense needs with safe gun storage. Because if it's so locked up and you gotta like load it and go get the ammunition over here, but you need it, how do we kind of balance that?
This is the most common question I get when I talk about safe gun storage with my families, especially in Miami. So parents can actually get or use quick access safes or lock boxes, such as biometric safes that require a fingerprint, much
Oh, wow.
similar to the ones that we use to unlock our cell phones, and
Yeah,
still
sure.
maintain safe gun storage practices.
That's right.
Further, it's possible that an unsecured gun may actually increase the likelihood of crime and violence, though, as it an increased risk of through a increased risk of gun theft. Each
Oh, yeah.
year, an estimated 200,000 to 500,000 guns are stolen.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow. It's probably not good guys stealing the guns necessarily either.
Probably
So
not.
yeah. Well, that's good. That's interesting about the biometrics thing. Cause yeah, my first thought would be, okay, if I have a gun and I have it for if I need it, but it's
Yeah,
stored away and the ammunition's over there, how do I
it's
okay,
just as quick as unlocking your cell phone.
there you go. So it can be done. And that's so safe because your kid can't get into that without your fingerprint. Great. Well, how can you spoke a little bit about this the staggering rates of suicide as it relates to just the accessibility of guns in the home. How can safe storage practices obviously help reduce that risk?
So yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, yes, suicide attempts by gun are significantly higher rate of success,
Mhm.
unfortunately, than
Yeah.
overdoses and other attempts. Over 80% of child firearm suicides involved a gun from their home or from the home of a relative or a friend. So immediate access. People of any age who are depressed are at risk for increased risk of suicide. If
Yeah.
someone in your family or someone that you know has depression or has had thoughts of suicide, all guns should be removed from the home. If the guns cannot be removed, it is even more important to store the gun unloaded, locked up, with the bullets stored separately,
Yeah.
and the keys hidden.
Yeah. That's good. Wow.
Mm.
I'm just the statistics set me back because they're just I think it helps put so many things in perspective for us because we have these assumptions of what we think, but when you hear the actual numbers like that and what you guys even are seeing of things coming into the hospital, it's staggering. And we talked about being at risk for suicide. What are some things that risk factors or warning signs that parents need to be aware of? Because maybe your kid knows that
Yeah.
you have a gun in your home. Maybe you don't know that they're really struggling. Like, what kind of things could parents be watching out for?
Yeah. So there are warning signs, but it's important to note that not all children who are at risk of suicide will show these warning signs.
Mhm.
However, they may include sudden changes in behavior, such as social isolation, withdrawal from friends or from family, locking themselves in their room more, or
Mhm.
increased substance use, changes in sleep patterns. Sometimes it's sleeping more, sometimes it's sleeping less. Sometimes there may even be expressions of suicidal thoughts that may come as no reason to live, or I just don't want to be here anymore.
Mhm.
Feelings of hopelessness or guilt, that they may express as well. And then you might recognize mood changes, agitation, increased aggression, the depression, crying, anxiety. These are all some of the warning signs that you can look for. And once again, early intervention and access to mental health can help identify and address these issues before they escalate to violence.
That's right. That's right. And I will put a plug here for previous episodes of Parental Guidance. We've done at least 2 or 3 on just the importance of mental health care, and those were some of our most lively episodes because people were so engaged, so many questions. So you can find all of those at parentalguidance.org. We have the whole archives there full of literally dozens of resources. So if you're listening in, go check those out. You can search a number of different topics. But again, if you're listening and you have a question for our expert, drop that in our Q&A and I'll get that in front of her. But Annie, thank you so much. I want to keep going and say, what advice would you have for parents who may not have personal experience with firearms? That would be me. I'm terrified of them. I should probably be less terrified in case I ever need to use one, but I'm so terrified of them that I just stay away. But for the parent who maybe doesn't have experience, but wants to educate their children successfully about gun safety.
So, fortunately, there are resources available for parents about how to talk to your children and how to address this subject. The AAPhealthychildren.org website has a lot of great parent tips and information on there, geared specifically for parents and how to approach this conversation. If you have any concerns about your child's safety, their mental health, or their physical safety, I would recommend just reach out to your pediatrician for support.
Mhm. Yeah, that's always a great place to start.
Mhm.
Um, Talk to us a little bit. Part of your work, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about that if you can share too. But you're really influencing the community and advocating for your patients. Like we said, both in the clinic but also in the community. And how can we, as parents, get involved to help our communities? Not only just our families, but maybe our neighborhoods or our larger communities or our friend groups, even be educated on gun safety.
Mhm. So, Sierra, you mentioned earlier the statistics. That's
Mhm.
one of the reasons I'm so grateful that you guys provided this opportunity for us, because it is. Nobody really realizes the gravity of the situation until you hear the statistics. Gun violence has gone from being mainly a legal issue to now it's a public health epidemic. So parents can serve as an advocate for firearm safety. The American Academy of Pediatrics supports gun safety legislation to help address this important public health issue. They believe that common sense steps such as banning assault weapons and high capacity ammunitions, background checks can save lives.
Yeah.
While the effects of unintended shooting can be deadly, these events can be prevented. Gun
Yeah.
safety is important knowledge for parents who own guns, parents who don't own guns, and for anyone
Mhm.
who just wants to keep their community safe.
Yeah. That's so good. I think I've just even in our conversation, I'm thinking like, okay, where are like my spheres of influence or just with my mom groups to have these conversations. I have a small group of women that we meet regularly every week just to talk about life and family and how are we raising kids and all this. And I'm thinking, we've never talked about this. Like, this is a great topic to just even bring up in that time to say, do you guys store, in the appropriate way? Because, like you said, so many of those statistics, those numbers could be drastically different if we just stored things properly. So,
Yeah.
thank you so much
Unfortunately,
for.
many of these conversations don't come up until it's brought to us in the media. But
Mm,
as I've tried to emphasize over and over and over again, these conversations can be preventative.
yeah, that's
Mhm.
great. That's right. That's what we're doing tonight. So, wow, I feel like we like rapid fired through our questions. No pun intended. I didn't mean like, but I just feel like you have covered so much information. Again, if anyone's listening and you feel like just in our discussion, if there's something specific you would like to ask Dr. Cadiz, you can drop that in the Q&A. But otherwise, Dr. Cadiz, I'd love for you to just share a little bit more of just what is maybe encourage us as parents. You're kind of on the inside world working with these residents and advocating for these things. Give us some good news, like tell us some good news. Obviously, prevention is huge, but just things that you're seeing in your work. And I mean, maybe you just have a word to encourage parents.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you brought up the residents. So working with the university, I work with residents, I work with medical students. And fortunately, one of the things that is happening now is that I don't know if it's in response to what's happening, but we are teaching our residents and our medical students how to address these topics with family members, how to address these topics with the patients, with our children, and those kinds of things. So that education for the provider is actually increased and improving, which once again trickles down to the benefit of the families and the parents and all of that.
That's
Mhm.
great. That's great. I've got to say, my pediatrician's never asked me. I've got 4 babies and they've done all the checkups on time. And I was like, I've never been asked if we have a firearm or if it's stored safely. To know that you're raising up the
Mhm.
next, generation of, like you said, healthcare providers who are thinking in that way is just huge because that's what
Yeah,
they.
for years we talked about pool safety and
Yeah.
fire alarms and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. But no, yeah, now as with the statistics that are changing, it is equally important to start asking about firearms and gun safety.
That's great. Dr. Cadiz, thank you so much for your time. I think you also win the award for just like most efficient communicating this information to us. I think you've came so prepared and it was packaged so well.
Mhm.
I know I'm leaving with just the enthusiasm and courage to have these conversations with my loved ones, with those who, my children interact with. A lot of times they're spending time with grandparents or, aunt and uncle cousins. And I don't know what their situation is, but now I'm going to ask. And just great questions for us and to remind the children if they ever see whether they think it's real or not to just step away, don't touch it, exit the room and talk to an adult. I think that's a really
Mhm.
easy stop, drop, and roll that I'm going to be teaching my kids this week, even. So I just appreciate your time tonight as our expert. I do, before we close, I want to draw your attention, guests that are listening in, to our next webinar. It's going to happen on Thursday, November 16th. So we're every third Thursday of the month. We are going to be joining with our expert to talk about preventing food allergies and how we can help not ruin our holidays with food allergies, because we're having holiday dishes and you're being with family and you don't know what they cooked with and all these different things, but at least one of the top 8 allergens is in most holiday dishes. So the holidays can be challenging for parents who are managing food allergies and sensitivities for themselves, for their children. So join us and learn how to navigate food allergies safely and how to handle reactions with confidence. So gain the knowledge that you need to keep you and your family safe as you celebrate the holidays worry-free, because with the holidays coming, we don't need any additional worries. So make a note to join us Thursday, November 16th. Again, this webinar, as with all of our others, will be available on parentalguidance.org. So you can go there, you can sign up for upcoming episodes, you can download resources and tips. So everything is right there on the website, parentalguidance.org. If you'd like, you could screenshot this screen here. This is some great resources that Dr. Cadiz mentioned. If you want to continue to do some research on this, I think that besmartforkids.org, bradyunited.org, injuryfreemiami.org, as well as healthychildren.org. So check out those websites, screenshot this, and save it for later. Again, if you want to pass this webinar on to a friend, give us a week or so. We're going to get it on the website, but then you can direct them to parentalguidance.org and they can watch it and catch it there. So thank you again to all of our audience for joining us. Dr. Cadiz, thank you for your time this evening. We appreciate you so much.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed this. And I just want to say key points to take away from this is, once again, children safest in a home without a gun. But if you do have one, keep it unloaded, keep it locked up, ammunition separately locked up, and keep the keys in combination away from children.